The bulldozer's engine roared to life as Sarah watched her neighbor Karen storm across the yard, tears streaming down her face, clutching a white duck to her chest like a lifeline. "You can't do this," Karen screamed over the mechanical thunder. "Duchess is registered. She's my therapy animal." But Sarah had already made her choice, one that would unleash a neighborhood war nobody saw coming, where property lines became battle lines and a simple pool removal would expose secrets that would destroy everything Karen had built on lies. The first crack appeared in Sarah's concrete paradise on a Tuesday morning in late September, spiderwebbing across the deep end like a lightning strike frozen in time. She knelt beside the pool's edge, running her fingers along the jagged fissure that had cost her 3 sleepless nights and 2 contractor consultations. The diagnosis was terminal: foundation shift, ground settling, structural failure. $18,000 to repair, or $12,000 to remove it entirely. "Might as well tear it down," she muttered, watching her reflection ripple in the chlorinated water that had once been her sanctuary. The pool had been David's dream, installed the summer before the divorce papers arrived. Now it was just an expensive reminder of promises broken and a marriage that had cracked just as definitively as the concrete beneath her feet. The sound of splashing from next door made her look up. Karen Middleton stood waist-deep in her own pool, a pristine above-ground affair surrounded by decorative stones and solar lights. But she wasn't alone. A large white duck paddled in circles around her, occasionally letting out satisfied quacks. As Karen scattered what looked like organic lettuce across the water's surface, "Good morning, Duchess," Karen cooed, her voice carrying the sing-song tone she reserved for her feathered companion. "Are you ready for your morning swim therapy?" Sarah bit back her first response and settled for a wave. Karen had moved in 18 months ago, a recently widowed woman in her 50s who had immediately set about transforming her modest backyard into what she called a healing sanctuary. The duck had arrived 3 months later, along with a laminated certificate that Karen had proudly displayed to anyone who would listen. Duchess was officially registered as an emotional support animal. The neighbors had been skeptical at first. Emotional support animals were typically dogs or cats, not waterfowl. But Karen had documentation, thick folders of paperwork, letters from therapists, even what appeared to be a small laminated ID card that she kept in her purse. Besides, Duchess was remarkably well behaved for a duck. She didn't wander into other yards, rarely made noise except for the occasional contented quack, and seemed genuinely devoted to Karen's well-being. Sarah had even grown fond of watching their morning routine, Karen's gentle voice, Duchess's enthusiastic paddle dancing, the peaceful domesticity of it all. It had been one of the few bright spots in her increasingly isolated existence. "Sarah," Karen called out, waving from across the chain-link fence that separated their properties. "How's your pool situation? Any word from the contractors?" "Gintine. It removed," Sarah called back, trying to keep her tone light. "Should start next week." The transformation in Karen's expression was immediate and dramatic. Her face went pale, then flushed red, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Duchess seemed to sense the shift in mood, swimming closer to her owner with concerned quacks. "Removed?" Karen's voice cracked on the word. But why can't you just repair it?" Sarah climbed to her feet, brushing concrete dust from her hands. "Too expensive. And honestly, I never use it anymore. Makes more sense to just fill in the space. Maybe plant a garden." "You can't." The words came out flat, definitive. Karen waded toward the edge of her pool, Duchess following like a loyal shadow. "Sarah, you absolutely cannot remove that pool." The certainty in her neighbor's voice made Sarah pause. "Excuse me?" "Duchess needs that pool," Karen said, her voice rising with what sounded like panic. "Her therapy requires access to a large body of water. My pool is too small, too shallow. She needs the space to exercise properly, to maintain her psychological health." Sarah stared at her neighbor, trying to process what she was hearing. "Karen, it's my pool, on my property, and it's broken, but she's been using it for months." Karen climbed out of her pool with jerky, agitated movements, water cascading from her floral print swimsuit. Duchess followed, hopping onto the concrete deck with surprising grace. "Every morning and evening, when you're not home, she swims laps, practices her diving, works through her anxiety. It's part of her prescribed therapy routine." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You've been letting your duck swim in my pool, without asking." "The gate was unlocked," Karen said defensively, scooping Duchess into her arms like a protective parent. "And you never used it, I thought. I thought you wouldn't mind." "Duchess is a registered therapy animal, Sarah. She has rights." "She's a duck?" The words exploded out of Sarah before she could stop them. "She's a duck swimming in my private pool without my permission." "She's not just a duck," Karen snapped, her earlier panic crystallizing into righteous anger. "She's a vital part of my mental health treatment. I have documentation, Sarah, legal protection. You can't just destroy her therapeutic environment." Sarah felt something crack inside her chest, a sensation disturbingly similar to the sound her pool had made that first morning. "Watch me?" She turned and walked toward her house, Karen's voice following her across the yard. "Sarah, please. You don't understand what you're doing." Duchess has been through trauma, we both have. That pool is the only place she feels safe to fully express herself, the only place where she can practice the behaviors that keep her psychologically stable. Sarah paused at her back door, hand on the handle. Then maybe you should have asked before turning my property into your duck's private therapy center. I'm calling my therapist, Karen called out, her voice breaking, and my lawyer, and animal control. They need to know what you're planning to do to a registered support animals treatment environment. You do that, Sarah said, stepping inside and closing the door firmly behind her. But even through the walls, she could hear Karen's voice, high and desperate, talking to Duchess in soothing tones that couldn't quite mask the hysteria building. Underneath, the bulldozer arrived on Monday morning at 7:30 sharp. Sarah had spent the weekend researching emotional support animal laws, property rights, and trespassing statutes. The results had been both reassuring and troubling. While emotional support animals did have certain legal protections, those protections didn't extend to unauthorized use of private property. Karen had no legal right to demand access to Sarah's pool for her duck's therapy, but she also couldn't shake the memory of Karen's face that morning, the genuine panic, the desperate protectiveness as she held Duchess. Whatever was driving her neighbor's attachment to that duck, it ran deeper than simple pet ownership. The bulldozer's engine rumbled to life, just as Sarah stepped onto her back porch with her morning coffee. The operator, a weathered man named Tony, waved from his cab and began positioning the machine next to the pool. That's when she saw Karen. Her neighbor stood at the fence line in a pink bathrobe and slippers, clutching Duchess against her chest. Her face was streaked with tears, her hair uncombed and wild. She looked like she hadn't slept. Sarah? Karen's voice was hoarse, desperate. Please, I'm begging you. Just give me 2 weeks. I'm working with my therapist to find an alternative solution. There's a community center across town that might let Duchess use their pool during off hours. I just need a little time to make arrangements. Sarah set down her coffee cup and walked to the fence. Up close, Karen looked even worse, dark circles under her eyes, a slight tremor in her hands as she stroked Duchess's feathers. Karen, you should have thought about this before you started using my pool without permission. I know I was wrong, Karen said, the words tumbling out in a rush, but you have to understand Duchess isn't just my support animal. She's my lifeline. After Harold died, after the accident, I couldn't function, couldn't leave the house, couldn't sleep, couldn't even think about facing another day. The therapist suggested an emotional support animal, and when I met Duchess at the rescue, something just clicked. She saved my life. Sarah, literally saved my life. Duchess quacked softly, as if responding to her name. The sound was oddly musical, almost soothing. I'm sorry about your husband, Sarah said carefully, but that doesn't give you the right to trespass on my property. 2 weeks, Karen pleaded. That's all I'm asking. Just until I can find another solution. I'll pay for the any costs from postponing the demolition. Sarah found herself wavering. The woman in front of her was clearly in genuine distress, and 2 weeks wasn't an unreasonable request. But something about the situation felt off, a nagging sense that there were pieces of this story she wasn't getting. Karen, how exactly did Duchess end up needing pool therapy? Most ducks are perfectly happy with ponds or small water features. Karen's grip on Duchess tightened almost imperceptibly. She has specific needs, trauma-related. The rescue told me she'd been through something terrible before I adopted her. Large bodies of water help her feel secure, help her process her anxiety, and your therapist specifically prescribed pool access. The forensics team arrived at 6:15 p.m., just as the autumn sun was casting long shadows across what had once been Sarah's backyard. Detective Ray Kowalski stepped out of an unmarked sedan, took one look at the excavation site, and immediately called for additional units. How many? He asked Tony, who was sitting on his bulldozer's tracks, chain-smoking, and looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Hard to say for sure, Tony replied, exhaling smoke, but I counted at least 30 skulls before I stopped digging. Could be more underneath. Detective Kowalski was a 20-year veteran with the kind of weathered face that came from seeing too much human cruelty. He'd worked missing persons, homicides, and enough animal abuse cases to know that whoever had created this burial ground was likely responsible for more than just dead pets. Ma'am, he said, turning to Sarah, I need you to walk me through everything that happened today, starting from when your neighbor first objected to the pool removal. Sarah found herself repeating the story for the third time that day, but now, the details felt different, weighted with sinister implications. Karen's desperate panic, her elaborate theatrical performance with the media, her intimate knowledge of legal loopholes, none of it had been about a duck's therapy needs. Detective, Sarah said as she finished her account, there's something else. She asked me where Duchess was, and she didn't know. A woman who supposedly can't function without her emotional support animal had no idea where that animal was. You think the duck ran off? I think there never was a duck. Detective Kowalski raised an eyebrow. Come again? Sarah walked to the fence line and pointed toward Karen's empty backyard. Look at her pool. It's clean, perfectly maintained. No duck droppings anywhere. No food dishes, no specialized equipment for a waterfowl, and in 18 months of living next to her, I never once saw her take that duck to a veterinarian, never saw delivery trucks bringing duck food or supplies. The detective followed her gaze, his expression growing more serious. So what was she carrying around all those times you saw her with the animal? I don't know, but I'm starting to think everything about Karen Middleton was an elaborate performance. A shout from the excavation site interrupted their conversation. One of the forensics technicians was crouched in the crater, carefully photographing something with a high-powered camera. Detective, the technician called. You need to see this. Hurried over to the edge of the hole. The technician, a young Asian woman with meticulous attention to detail, pointed to a section of exposed earth where the plastic sheeting had been carefully peeled back. This isn't random disposal, she said. Look at the arrangement. The bodies are laid out in a specific pattern, heads pointing east, paws positioned in ritualistic poses. And look at this. She indicated a small metal object partially buried beneath one of the larger skeletons. With tweezers, she carefully extracted what appeared to be a dog tag. Princess, she read aloud. If found, please call 555-0847. Detective. Kowalski pulled out his phone and dialed the number. After 3 rings, a voice answered, elderly hopeful. Hello, did you find Princess? Sir, this is Detective Kowalski with the county police. Can you tell me when Princess went missing? 3 years ago, the voice quavered. She was a golden retriever, 8 years old. Sweetest dog you ever met. She disappeared from our backyard one night, and we never saw her again. The detective exchanged grim looks with Sarah. Sir, I'm going to need you to come down to the station. We may have found Princess, but there are some questions we need to ask you. As he hung up, the forensics technician called out again. She'd found another tag, then another. Each one told the same story, beloved pets that had vanished without a trace over the past 5 years, all from within a 10-mile radius of Sarah's neighborhood. This is organized, Detective Kowalski said grimly. Someone was systematically collecting animals from the area and bringing them here. But why bury them under the pool? Sarah asked. Why not just dispose of them somewhere remote? Because, came a new voice from behind them. The pool wasn't built to hide the bodies. The bodies were buried first, and the pool was built to mark the spot. They turned to see a woman in her 50s approaching, badge hanging from a lanyard. Around her neck, she had the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. Dr. Amanda Chen, FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit, she introduced herself. Detective, I got your call about the potential serial animal killer. Mind if I take a look? Sarah did a double take at the name, Chen. That's my last name too. Dr. Chen smiled briefly. It's a common name, but right now, I'm more interested in what we're dealing with here. She peered down into the excavation, her expression growing more serious as she took in the systematic arrangement of the remains. This isn't someone who killed animals for pleasure, she said after a long moment. This is someone who killed them for a purpose. The ritualistic positioning, the careful burial, the decision to build a permanent marker over the site. This person was creating a shrine. A shrine to what? Detective Kowalski asked. That's what we need to figure out. But I can tell you this much: whoever did this lived in this neighborhood, had intimate knowledge of local pet ownership patterns, and felt safe enough on this property to spend considerable time creating this ... memorial. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Dr. Chen, my ex-husband, supervised the pool installation personally. He insisted on handling all the contractor communications, choosing the exact location, even specifying the depth and dimensions. Where is your ex-husband now? I honestly don't know. He moved out 18 months ago when our divorce was finalized, and I haven't heard from him since. Dr. Chen and Detective Kowalski exchanged meaningful looks. Ma'am, the detective said carefully. What was your ex-husband's name? David Chen? David Harold Chen? The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Chen's face went pale, and Detective Kowalski's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. Sarah, Dr. Chen said slowly. Harold was Karen's supposedly dead husband's name. The implications hit Sarah. Like a physical blow? You think David is alive? You think he's been living next door, pretending to be a woman? I think, Detective Kowalski said grimly. We need to put out a bolo for both Karen Middleton and David Harold Chen, and we need to search that house next door before any more evidence disappears. The search of Karen's house began at 8:30 p.m. Under the harsh glare of portable floodlights, what they found in the first 30 minutes redefined everything they thought they knew about the case. The master bedroom contained 2 distinct wardrobes, one filled with women's clothing in size, the other with men's clothing that would fit David perfectly. The bathroom held 2 sets of toiletries, 2 different prescriptions, and a makeup kit sophisticated enough to completely transform someone's appearance, but it was the basement that revealed the true scope of the deception. The walls were covered with surveillance photographs, hundreds of them, documenting the daily routines of neighborhood pet owners. Sarah's own house featured prominently, with detailed shots of her comings and goings, her work schedule, even images taken through her windows at night. Jesus Christ, Detective Kowalski breathed. scanning the photos. He's been watching the entire neighborhood for years. Dr. Chen was examining a workbench in the corner, where she'd found detailed maps of the local area with houses marked in different colors. Red for houses with dogs, blue for cats, green for other pets. This wasn't random predation, she said. This was systematic hunting. He identified targets, studied their routines, and then struck when the opportunities presented themselves. Sarah found herself staring at a corkboard covered with missing pet flyers, dozens of them, dating back 5 years. Each one had been carefully preserved, with handwritten notes in the margins documenting dates, times, and methods. Princess, March 15, 22. Backyard, midnight, chloroform. She read aloud from one of the notes. Max, the 8th of July, 21, morning walk, park. Entrance, tranquilizer gun. My God. He was keeping trophies. Not trophies, Dr. Chen corrected. Documentation. This level of record-keeping suggests someone with obsessive-compulsive tendencies and a need to memorialize his actions. The question is, why animals? What was driving this behavior? The answer came from the forensics technician, who had been examining a locked filing cabinet in the corner. She'd managed to pick the lock and was now sorting through manila folders, filled with documents. Detective, you need to see this, she called. These aren't just random veterinary records. They're psychological profiles. She handed over a thick folder labeled Subject Analysis. Canine Behavioral Patterns. Inside were detailed notes written in David's handwriting, documenting everything from pack hierarchy behaviors to stress responses to separation anxiety. He was studying them, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Not just killing, them studying them. Dr. Chen took the folder and began reading, her expression growing more troubled with each page. This is sophisticated behavioral analysis. Whoever wrote this has extensive knowledge of animal psychology and research methodology. What kind of research? Detective Kowalski asked. The kind that requires live subjects, Dr. Chen said grimly. These notes reference behavioral modifications, stress testing, and something called terminal data collection. I think we're looking at evidence. Sarah's fingers flew across David's keyboard as Detective Kowalski coordinated the emergency response over his radio. While law enforcement rushed to protect the potential victims on Maple Street, she dove deep into the digital architecture of her ex-husband's operation. Dr. Chen, she called to the FBI analyst, look at this subscriber database. These aren't just random perverts paying for animal torture videos. These are professionals, veterinarians, research scientists, university professors, and they're not just watching, they're contributing. Dr. Chen hurried over to examine the screen. What she saw made her stomach turn. The database contained detailed profiles of hundreds of subscribers, many with advanced degrees in psychology, veterinary medicine, and behavioral science. Each subscriber had contributed research suggestions, funding for equipment, and even live direction during David's streaming sessions. This is a collaborative research network, she said grimly. David wasn't working alone. He was the field operative for a much larger organization. And look at this, Sarah said, opening another file. Payment records going back 3 years. Someone's been funding this operation to the tune of nearly $2 million. The money's coming from something called the Behavioral Research Consortium. Detective Kowalski finished his radio call and joined them at the computer. Any luck tracing that transmission? He bounced the signal through 17 different servers across 6 countries, Sarah replied. But he made one mistake. He's still logged into the main database, which means I can track every device that's currently connected to his network. She pulled up a real-time network map showing active connections. Most were scattered across the globe, subscribers tuning in for the evening's entertainment. But one signal was local, broadcasting from a location less than 5 miles away. Industrial District, Detective Kowalski noted, studying the coordinates. Warehouse complex down by the river. Perfect place to set up a mobile laboratory. Detective, an officer's voice crackled over the radio. We've got a situation at 247 Maple Street. Homeowner reports someone tried to break in through the basement window, but fled when the security alarm activated. K-29 units are tracking, but the trail goes cold at the street. He's testing their defenses, Dr. Chen said. David's not randomly targeting houses. He's conducting reconnaissance, identifying which homes have security systems, which residents are most vulnerable. Sarah continued typing, accessing deeper levels of David's database. What she found chilled her to the bone. David hadn't just been studying animal behavior, he'd been developing a comprehensive psychological profile of every person in there. Neighbor, he knows everything about us, she said, scrolling through files labeled with neighbors' names, work schedules, family relationships, medical histories, financial problems. He's been gathering intelligence for years. She opened her own file, expecting to find the usual surveillance notes. Instead, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. Subject S1. Primary target for Phase 2 implementation. She read aloud. Isolated following divorce. Minimal social support network. Demonstrated problem-solving capabilities present. Optimal challenge parameters. Preliminary behavioral modification began with pool crisis simulation. Subject responded, predictably, to manufactured emotional stress. The whole thing was a setup, she whispered. The broken pool, Karen's panic about the duck. The media circus of it was designed to study my reactions under stress. Sarah, Dr. Chen said urgently, if you were his primary target, then everything that's happening tonight is about drawing you out, the break-in attempts, the timeline acceleration. He's trying to force you into a specific behavioral pattern. Before Sarah could respond, David's computer chimed with another incoming message. This time, the text appeared across multiple screens simultaneously. Phase 2, Subject S1. Isolation protocol, successful. Target has been separated from law enforcement protection and placed in controlled environment. Beginning stress escalation sequence. The basement lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Detective Kowalski immediately drew his weapon and activated his radio, but got only static in response. Signal jammer? Dr. Chen said grimly. He's blocking all communications. The stairs, Sarah said, pointing toward the narrow wooden steps that led up to the main house. We need to get out of here. But as they approached the stairwell, they could hear the distinctive sound of a power drill. Someone was securing the basement door from above, trapping them in David's makeshift laboratory. There has to be another way out, Detective Kowalski said, scanning the space with his flashlight. No one builds a laboratory in a basement without an emergency exit. Sarah was back at the computer, her software engineering background kicking in. I can use his own system against him, she said. If he's jamming our communications, he's doing it through a local transmitter. And if he's monitoring us through these cameras, that means there's a two-way data connection. She began typing rapidly, accessing the network architecture that connected David's various surveillance and control systems. Every smart device in this house is connected to his central server, including the electronic locks, the security system, and the sound of gas hissing filled the basement. Chemical attack, Dr. Chen said, covering her nose and mouth with her shirt. He's pumping something into the ventilation system. Not chemicals, Sarah said, still typing frantically. Look at the concentration readings on his monitoring equipment. He's not trying to kill us, he's trying to sedate us. This is another experiment. Detective Kowalski was already searching for the source of the gas, but the sophisticated ventilation system made it impossible to locate the intake vents. How long before that stuff takes effect? Based on the atmospheric sensors, maybe 10 minutes, Sarah replied. But I think I can reverse the flow. She accessed the building's environmental controls through David's network, discovering that every system in the house could be operated remotely. Got it, she said, executing a command sequence that shut down the gas flow and activated emergency ventilation fans. But that's just buying us time. He'll have backup plans. As if summoned by her words, David's voice filled the basement through hidden speakers. Very good. Sarah, I knew you'd figure out the technical aspects quickly. That's why you were selected as the primary subject. Your problem-solving abilities under extreme stress are exactly what we need to document. We, Dr. Chen asked. David, who else is involved in this? The Behavioral Research Consortium represents the future of psychological science, David's voice continued. Traditional research methods are limited by ethical constraints and institutional oversight. Our work here represents a new frontier, direct observation of human behavioral patterns under authentic survival stress. You're talking about torture, Detective Kowalski said. I'm talking about science, David corrected. Do you have any idea how much we've learned about pain tolerance, decision-making under pressure, and group dynamics from our animal studies? But animals have limited cognitive complexity. Human subjects offer exponentially more valuable data. Sarah had tuned out David's monologue and was focused on the computer screen, where she'd discovered something that changed everything. Network maps showed that David wasn't operating alone tonight. There were at least 6 other people connected to his system, all broadcasting from locations throughout the city. Dr. Chen, she said urgently, this isn't just about us. Look at these connection points. There are simultaneous operations happening across the entire metropolitan area. David's part of something much bigger. Dr. Chen studied the network data, her face pale in the emergency lighting, coordinated human experimentation on multiple subjects. If this is what I think it is, we're looking at the largest illegal human research program in U.S. history. And we're not just witnesses, Sarah realized. We're test subjects. The basement door above them suddenly clicked open, and they could hear footsteps descending the stairs. But instead of David, a woman in a white lab coat appeared, someone none of them had ever seen before. Good evening, she said pleasantly, as if greeting guests at a dinner party. I'm Dr. Rebecca Martinez, Senior Research Coordinator for the Behavioral Research Consortium. I believe you've been speaking with my colleague David about our work here. You're the therapist, Sarah said, pieces clicking into place. The one who supposedly prescribed pool therapy for Karen's duck. I am indeed a licensed therapist, Dr. Martinez replied, though my practice focuses more on research than traditional patient care. The Karen Middleton persona was quite effective, wasn't it? David's theatrical skills have improved tremendously over the past 18 months. Detective Kowalski kept his weapon trained on her, but Dr. Martinez seemed completely unconcerned by the threat. Officer, I should inform you that we have teams monitoring 6 other law enforcement personnel tonight, she said calmly. Your colleagues are currently experiencing their own customized stress scenarios. Any aggressive action on your part will result in immediate escalation of their situations. You're bluffing, he said. But his voice lacked conviction. Dr. Martinez pulled out a tablet and showed them a live video of Detective Kowalski's partner, trapped in what appeared to be a flooding underground garage, water rising. The emergency responders who breached the basement 37 minutes later found something that defied every prediction. Sarah, Detective Kowalski, and Dr. Chen weren't traumatized victims cowering in a corner. They were systematically documenting evidence with the methodical precision of a federal task force. Ma'am, you need to step away from that computer, the SWAT team leader ordered as he secured the basement. This is an active crime scene. This is our only chance to trace their network before they shut it down, Sarah replied without looking up from the screen. She'd been copying terabytes of data for the past 20 minutes, racing against automated deletion protocols that were systematically destroying evidence. Every second we waste arguing is another connection severed, another victim's identity lost. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, the SWAT commander, had seen enough domestic crisis situations to recognize when someone was operating on pure adrenaline and intelligence rather than panic. He made a tactical decision that would prove crucial. Chen, you've got 5 more minutes, he said. Then we evacuate and let the FBI cyber team handle this. But Dr. Amanda Chen was already shaking her head. Lieutenant, the FBI cyber team won't have access to the live network. Sarah's right, this is our only window before they implement their scorched earth protocols. Through the basement speakers, which were still connected to David's communication system, they could hear coordinated activity at the warehouse complex. Vehicles starting, equipment being moved, the efficient sounds of a major operation shutting down with military precision. They're evacuating, Detective Kowalski observed. How long have they been planning this contingency? Years, Sarah said, opening yet another encrypted file. Look at this: detailed evacuation protocols for every facility, pre-positioned resources, alternate identities already established. The Behavioral Research Consortium isn't just conducting illegal experiments, they're a shadow organization with the infrastructure of a government agency. She pulled up a directory that made everyone in the basement go silent. The file contained detailed profiles of over 300 researchers, technicians, and administrators, spread across 47 facilities in 12 countries. Each profile included academic credentials, security clearances, and what appeared to be government employment histories. Jesus Christ, Lieutenant Webb breathed. Half these people work for the Department of Defense, the CDC, university research hospitals. This isn't a rogue science operation, this is institutional. Dr. Chen was examining a parallel file that contained funding sources. Congressional appropriations, NIH grants, DoD research contracts. They've been using legitimate government research funding to subsidize illegal human experimentation. Sarah, Detective Kowalski said urgently, can you access their real-time communications? If they're evacuating, they have to be coordinating somehow. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, diving deeper into the network architecture than she'd ever attempted. What she found was a sophisticated command structure that looked more like a military operation than a research consortium. Got it, she said, opening a live communication channel. But you're not going to like what you hear. Through the speakers came the calm, professional voice of someone clearly accustomed to managing complex operations under pressure. Facility 7, confirm data purge completion and begin Phase 4 protocols. Facility 12, your extraction team should reach the secondary site in 18 minutes. All research assets are to be transferred to international facilities immediately. Another voice responded, Control, what's our status on the media narrative? The fabricated consent documentation is broadcasting as planned, but local law enforcement is treating this as an active kidnapping investigation. That's expected and manageable, the first voice replied. Dr. Martinez will be released within 6 hours with full documentation supporting her cover story. The primary subjects will be discredited through standard protocols: mental health concerns, financial motivations, prior criminal associations. By tomorrow morning, this will be a story about elaborate insurance fraud, not human experimentation. Sarah felt sick. They're not just covering up what happened tonight, they're destroying our credibility preemptively. Can you trace that command? Center Lieutenant Webb asked. Working on it, Sarah replied, but her expression was grim. They're using satellite uplinks, bouncing signals through multiple relay stations. Even if I can get a location, it'll be abandoned by the time we reach it. Dr. Chen was studying another set of files that contained what appeared to be psychological profiles of everyone in the basement. They've been planning this specific scenario for months, she said. Look at these behavioral predictions. They knew exactly how each of us would react tonight. She opened Sarah's file and began reading. Subject will attempt digital countermeasures using available technology. Probability of successful data extraction, 73%. Probability of successful network penetration, 41%. Probability of emotional breakdown following revelation of institutional scope, 89%. Emotional breakdown, Sarah said. They think I'm going to have an emotional breakdown. Keep reading, Dr. Chen said quietly. Sarah continued. Subject's technical capabilities make her valuable for Phase 4 implementation. Recommend recruitment rather than neutralization. Psychological pressure points, professional isolation, financial insecurity, desire for recognition, recruitment probability, 67%. The basement fell silent, except for the hum of electronic equipment and the distant sound of emergency vehicles. They want to recruit me, Sarah said slowly. All of this, the pool, Karen, the experiments, even tonight it's been an extended job interview. Before anyone could respond, David's voice filled the basement one final time. Hello, Sarah, I see you found your recruitment file. Impressive work tonight, by the way. The network penetration was more sophisticated than our models predicted. David, where are you? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. Close enough to extend a formal offer, he replied. The Behavioral Research Consortium has been monitoring your work for 3 years. Your expertise in digital forensics, combined with your demonstrated problem-solving abilities under extreme stress, make you an ideal candidate for our cybersecurity division. You're offering me a job. After everything you've put me through, I'm offering you purpose, David corrected. The work we do advances human knowledge in ways that traditional research never could. The animal experiments you found were preliminary studies. The human behavioral analysis we conducted tonight represents the cutting edge of psychological science. Lieutenant Webb gestured for Sarah to keep David talking while his team traced the signal, but Sarah was staring at something else on the computer screen, a file that had just appeared in the directory. David, she said carefully, what happened to the real Karen Middleton? The pause that followed was telling. Karen was one of our early research subjects, David said finally. Volunteer work, of course. She was experiencing severe depression, following her husband's death, and agreed to participate in an experimental therapy program. Agreed to participate, or was coerced. The distinction becomes less relevant when the subject is no longer capable of distinguishing between reality and constructed scenarios, David replied. Karen's case taught us valuable lessons about long-term psychological manipulation and identity reconstruction. Sarah opened the file she'd been looking at. It contained video footage of the real Karen Middleton, a broken woman, being systematically destroyed through carefully orchestrated psychological torture disguised as therapy. You didn't study her, Sarah said, her voice deadly quiet. You erased her. We evolved her, David corrected. Karen Middleton's original personality was fundamentally damaged, incapable of meaningful existence. We gave her a new identity, a new purpose, a new life as part of our research team. By turning her into a puppet, by integrating her into something larger than herself. And we're offering you the same opportunity, Sarah, the chance to be part of revolutionary scientific advancement rather than remaining isolated in your small, insignificant existence. Sarah looked around the basement at the evidence of David's depravity, at the officers and agents who had risked their lives to rescue her, at the computer screen displaying the systematic destruction of innocent people's lives in the name of scientific progress. I have a counteroffer, she said. I'm listening. Go to hell. Instead of responding to David, Sarah executed a command sequence she'd been preparing for the past 10 minutes. Every piece of data she'd copied from the consortium's network began uploading simultaneously to 17 different destinations, news organizations, federal agencies, international law enforcement, academic institutions, and human rights organizations. But, more importantly, she activated a virus she'd embedded in their communication system. Within seconds, every facility in the consortium's network would receive the same data package, ensuring that even if they destroyed their local servers, copies of the evidence would exist everywhere. You're making a mistake, David said, but, for the first time, his voice carried a note of genuine concern. The only mistake I made was not demolishing that pool 3 years ago, Sarah replied. Through the speakers, they could hear alarms beginning to sound at multiple facilities as the data breach spread throughout